Hey guys, what another fantastic episode of Ahsoka. I mean, I truly loved this episode. Spoiler warning quickly, so just jump ship if you haven't seen this episode yet. But we finally got to see Thrawn, these alleged undead stormtroopers, more of Baylan and Shin, the Nightsisters slash Night Mothers, and even to my surprise, Ezra. Now, there's plenty to get into today, so we're just going to jump straight in from the start. We first see Ahsoka in this episode with Huyang while they're traveling through hyperspace. It's still unknown to us how long it actually takes to travel to this unknown galaxy, but I'm guessing we could roughly say Baylan and everyone was probably traveling during the whole events of the last episode. So I don't think this was one quick jump. Anyway, this is the first and only time we see Ahsoka in this episode. I feel like this is due to the backlash that the Book of Boba Fett had when Mando had his own 2 episodes. And I've actually seen people suggest that, and I find it rather stupid. Where the deal with this show is that it's integral to the part of the story, whereas in the Book of Boba Fett, it never really made any sense. But yeah, I'm not really going to delve into that as much as I could, and it might be something I do in another video, but hey. In this brief part of the episode, we get Ahsoka telling Huyang that Sabine decided to go with Baylan, and something that bugged me about this, and I'm not sure if I'm being slightly dramatic or something, but it seemed like Ahsoka went really downbeat again in the small amount of screen time we had for her in this episode, and that's something I wasn't really expecting, but I do expect it to probably end up changing in the next episode. In this small bit, we also get Huyang saying, in a galaxy far, far away, when starting his story. That honestly could mean lots of things, or it could just be a tiny tidbit to, the originals, and just Star Wars in general. But maybe everything did all start in a different galaxy in Star Wars, or maybe it's just genuinely a story for kids, like Ahsoka mentioned, and even Baylan. Now, jumping out of that sequence, we instantly arrive on Peridia, and we finally get to see why Ezra couldn't simply just come back with the Purrgil. As Baylan explains, this is where the Purrgil come to die, and we get to see the bones of the Purrgil kind of shattered all around this new planet surrounding it. I found it kind of quick for the pacing to just end up straight in front of the planet, when I'm sure there are plenty of different planets, just like the original Star Wars galaxy, but yeah, that was just a small gripe. We also find out that this is where the Dathomirians have been, or the remaining Dathomirians, and honestly, I was quite surprised to see the Nightsisters slash Mothers in live action. For some reason, I was under the impression that Morgan Elsbeth was the only Nightsister left with Merrin from Jedi Survivor, but I must say, they looked amazing and almost chilling in live action. I mean, it was 3 o'clock in the morning in the UK here, and I was just a bit nervous. And Filoni also kept the echoing noise that surrounded the Nightsisters when they spoke, like it did when we saw them in the Clone Wars. It was also semi-confirmed to us in this sequence that Sabine is indeed a Jedi, and I would still like to use that term rather lightly, but I must say I definitely liked Sabine more in this episode. It really felt like the Sabine that we saw in Rebels. Like I said previously about stories, Baylan and Shin also found themselves talking about stories at the beginning of this episode, and it's rather clear that Baylan does miss most things about the Jedi Order, and explained to Shin what he went through when he was her age, and how now, at his age, he's not surprised that this has happened and called it inevitable. To say that it's always bouncing off of one another. When one rises, the other will fall, then the one that fell rises, etc. We know what he means. We also finally get to see Shin blink in this episode, just ever so briefly. But yes, it's pretty clear that part of Baylan's motivation is to stop the constant back and forth. But there is still so much to cover about his motivation that we're all going to have to speculate for probably till the end of the series. And this is where he came in, man. I was so excited to see this. We finally got to see Thrawn's Chimera in live action, and it looked amazing. Typical grand entrance as always, though interesting to note that work has been done on the ship and has the similar gold we've seen on the space ring Elsbeth created and the ship that they came down with. In this sequence, we finally got to see Enoch in live action. I speculated it in my preview, that he was going to show up in this episode, and yeah, I mean, this character is really going to spawn similar Marok theories. But we also got to see all the Stormtroopers that I believe might be undead, but we haven't really had anything super clear about that yet. I must say, before we get into this first appearance from Thrawn, I really didn't like the updated version of his theme. The almost electric guitar noise didn't really fit for me, but that's just one of two small gripes that I have in this episode. Fat Thrawn honestly looked amazing though. The Nightsisters have really been feeding him good. But in all seriousness, Thrawn looks so good. And I was a little worried when I saw the trailers. But he looks really, really good. Interesting thing about this first scene is Thrawn is eager to send cargo back to the original galaxy. And I think it'll be interesting to find out what that actually is. And if it will be important for the last 2 episodes of the show or a potential season 2 or Dave Filoni movie. But to end this introduction to Thrawn, I must say he is almost exactly what I was hoping for him to be. And Lars Mikkelsen is already doing a fantastic job, and I really think Thrawn is being written brilliantly here. And I really do hope that it continues because we haven't had a really solid villain in Star Wars for a long time. And with Baylan and Shin too, I really hope that this continues to break strong. Moving on to Sabine, she's brought back to Thrawn. Obviously, they know each other quite well. Thrawn honours Sabine's deal with Baylan, obviously there being a small catch at the end and letting Baylan and Shin follow her, so when she finds Ezra, they can attempt to attack and kill them both. Sabine is then sent out with her weapons and a new creature that we haven't seen before called Tota, to find Ezra. With Enoch saying, "Die well, Mandalorian," a direct reference to Maul in Rebels. And I must say, the Tota that Sabine was riding wasn't my favourite new being in this episode, but I really did like the dynamic between it and Sabine. I really thought through their interactions in this episode, we really did start to see that Sabine from Rebels that I mentioned earlier. While searching, Sabine is attacked in a pretty cool sequence. I did think that some of the stuff with the lightsaber was a little clunky and a bit weird, but it didn't take me entirely out of the episode. Sabine then defeats all the bandits that attacked her, but ends up having her tracking device thing break that in the end wouldn't really mean all that much. Thrawn speaks with Elsbeth, telling her that their main objective is to get out of this galaxy and so. Therefore, what happens to Sabine and Ezra and even Baylan and Shin doesn't matter, and he will happily leave without them if they don't return. Moving back to Sabine, her and the Tota are searching when Tota detects food. It doesn't end up actually being food and some small hermit crab-like creatures. For some reason, they really, really took to me. They were by far like one of my favourite things of this episode. I saw someone on Twitter refer to them as space Jawas, and ever since then, it's really stuck with me. The space Jawas, or as they are actually called, Noti, take to Sabine's rebellion badge on her armour, displaying the necklaces and other items of clothing each of them possesses with the rebellion logo on them. And they end up leading her somewhere, claiming they know who Ezra is. Back to Shin and Baylan, they find the place where Sabine had fought those raiders. Can I just say, Baylan has one of the best themes in Star Wars, and massive credits to Kevin Kiner because he is doing a fantastic job with the music in the series. We then begin to learn a little more about Baylan's motivation, saying that something is calling to him, and there's something so much more in this galaxy. And I really do find this interesting because honestly, what could it be? Because it's clearly enough to get both Thrawn and the Nightsisters out of this planet. Could this potentially be a bigger threat to the galaxy than the actual villains that we see in this show? But here was the moment we were all waiting for. The Noti took Sabine back to their camp and showed her around when, boom, Ezra bloody Bridger. Esman Afadi looked brilliant as Ezra, and it looks really refreshing to see him in something other than orange. Sabine and Ezra's reunion actually hit me like a truck. As most of you know, I'm a big fan of Rebels, and you almost forget it's been over 5 years since the finale, and how important Sabine and Ezra's relationship was. Sabine does avoid the question of how she got there though, which I'm sure will be something further explored in the last 2 episodes. I'm really not sure how he will react if I'm honest. I really wasn't expecting to see Ezra so soon. I was kind of expecting to see him at the end of the next episode, but Filoni has being really bold with the pacing of this show, and even though I have a few gripes about how fast Sabine found him, I'm actually really enjoying the pace of it. To end the episode, we come back to Thrawn and the Night Mothers, where they tell Thrawn that another Jedi is coming, where Thrawn predicts it's Ahsoka Tano. Even though he must have been told by Morgan that Baylan killed him, it seems Thrawn also suspects something a little bit more from Baylan, which is perfect for his character, calling him flawed. Now, probably the best part of this episode for me was the ending line from Thrawn, when he said that he wants to know Ahsoka's background, history, homeworld, her master, and everything. Then this was just so Thrawn, and it opens up another door for Hayden Christensen to return as Anakin in this series. For those of you who may know, Thrawn and Anakin actually do have a backstory together, and it's something that is really explored in the Thrawn trilogy, so if that's something that interests you, I would really get into reading those books. But yes, of course, that's where this episode ends. And, of course, it left us just wanting more. Not to try and end with some small negativity, but there was just one thing that didn't make sense to me, and I've said it a couple times, but it just had to do with how fast Sabine found Ezra. You have to remember, Thrawn and his troops and Ezra have been stuck here for like 8 to 10 years, and I'm sure he's had patrols looking out for him ever since. So Sabine just a couple miles away to stumble across these small space Jawas and instantly be taken to him was a little strange, if I'm being honest. But like I said, for the pace of the story, I can somewhat let it slide. But yeah. Ultimately, Dave is doing a magical job, and this episode just brings even more excellence to the series that has been pumping out left, right, and centre. I mean, especially after the last 3 weeks. I thought Thrawn was brought in at the perfect time, and seeing Ezra again was really emotional. There's so much to cover about this episode over the next few days till episode 7, so we will be covering that all here on this channel. There is so much speculation about what Baylan is really after, what the deal with the Stormtroopers, and especially Enoch, what is Thrawn wanting to bring back to the original galaxy, and ultimately, how will this season end? The next episode, I'm sure, is going to be peak yet again, but to rate this episode, I have to give it a solid 9.5. I only really had 2 minor gripes, so I think that rating is entirely fair. But what do you guys think? Did you guys enjoy this episode? Where do you think we go from here? Make sure you stick around by hitting that subscribe button and liking this video. There's so much content to come over the next 7 days, so make sure to turn on that notification bell so you know exactly when it comes. But in the meantime, have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in my next video. Cheers.